gather around for the Speaker's Corner. Make yourself comfortable. We're going to have 15 minutes of a paradigm-changing discussion. Oh, look at those lights. Oh my God. How's the audio? Is the audio okay?
I guess.
Audio okay? All right, everybody. It is a great honor to be speaking to you today at the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization Global Conference on Sustainable Livestock Transformation. My name is Seth Itzkan, and I am the co-founder and director of Soil for Climate. We are a nonprofit advocating for the science, policies, and practices of soil restoration as a climate solution. And here is our logo and our QR code, so you can take a picture of this and be able to visit us on Facebook and LinkedIn. About 35,000 members on Facebook now, and about 100 countries represented. We believe that by restoring the soils of the earth, we can help reverse global warming while also providing food, water, and even cultural security for the approximately 10 billion people who will be inhabiting the planet by the century's end. And, of course, most of the soil in the world is in grassland ecosystems that co-evolved with ruminant herds. And that's why it is so essential to manage ruminant herds for soil health to assure a livable future for future generations. So that's why we're here today in a livestock climate, at a livestock conference, because livestock managed regeneratively is the essential component of the future of humanity. And indeed, we will not have a future without managing livestock regeneratively on approximately 3.5 billion hectares. Again, Soil for Climate, and here's our information. Just really quickly, with a few more minutes. So again, science, policy, practices, and paradigms of soil restoration as a climate solution. Science, of course, is the science of soil health and climate carbon flows. Practices is holistic plant grazing, holistic management, herd densities, paddock planning, like that. On the cropping side, we're talking about no-till, cover crops, crop rotation, crop diversity, that type of thing. Policies will include, for example, carbon markets, ecological outcome verification, ways of rewarding ecological stewardship, but most important is paradigms. And I think, as we all know, you can do science forever, but paradigms is where it really comes to play. And another way of paradigms is sort of like worldview, or if you will, narrative. And there is two essential narratives that define where we are right now in this conversation. And for me, it's what I call the scarcity paradigm versus the abundance paradigm. Scarcity versus the abundance. There's also what we might call share versus spin. And on the grazing side, there's intensive versus extensive. These are paradigms that frame how we have the conversation. And we like to be a forum to have those discussions so we can make proper planning moving forward. So again, we are Soil for Climate. We are advocating for soil as a climate solution, and essential to that will be regenerative grazing, or grazing managed for soil health in order to provide food, water, climate, and even cultural security for generations to come. So there we are in a nutshell. Thank you very much for your attention. That was short and sweet, right?
Seth, can you describe what regenerative grazing management looks like?
So the question is, what is regenerative grazing? So from my perspective, regenerative grazing is any type of grazing that results in an ecological indicator being improved. So pick your indicator. It sort of doesn't matter. And the fact is, you get them all. They all come together. So for example, a water infiltration rate, biological diversity, the percentage of ground cover, the soil carbon, the soil organic matter concentration, any of those. You can also do it in insect census on insects or birds. The fact is, you get them all. You don't just get one and not the other. You don't just get better soil carbon and not also get better water infiltration and more birds. It's all part of one package.
I want to talk about grazing and rest.
Grazing and rest. So again, this is the practice part. I've been influenced by what's called holistic management, holistic plant grazing. In the academic literature, you'll see terms like AMP grazing, adaptive multi-paddock grazing. You might see the term rotational grazing in the literature, but I try to push back against that because rotational grazing literally evolved. It literally was rotation around a central water point. And that isn't necessarily what we're talking about. We're talking about something much more nuanced and complex than that. But sometimes people say rotational grazing, okay, whatever. You know, but we're trying to advance the conversation. Holistic plant grazing will mean that you're grazing in a context in which social, economic, and environmental factors are all being considered. Okay, let me get a question from you guys here. At least you're paying attention, so ask me a question, ask me anything.
Why you cannot scale up your approach or
I'm sorry, what was the question?
how can you scale up?
Oh, scale up.
Around the world.
How do you scale? So the best way to scale up is just by becoming aware of what's called holistic management or holistic plant grazing, getting in touch with a savory hub, and just getting the training. The training is the most important part. And it's really very basic. It's literally just livestock management. Now, you can use it, you could use new technology like no fence, you know, the electric collars, you can control them on your cell phone, drones. I mean, there's lots of place for technology. But it's the paddock planning, which is really the core innovation. Yeah.
What's the difference between brittle and non-brittle landscape?
Oh, good question. My colleague here is asking a lot of good questions. Yours was a good one. So the question was, what's the difference between brittle and non-brittle environments? So a non-brittle environment is an environment that has perennial rain. So there's season-long rain. The brittle environments are environments where the rain is seasonal. You may only get it a few months during the year. Okay? And the fact is, most of the world is actually a brittle environment. And those are the environments in which herds of ruminants during the dry season are essential to move the nutrients in the water across the landscape. And that's the part, frankly, that the Western agricultural science simply didn't get because it evolved out of Northern Europe. And you're talking about, you know, London gets 50 inches of rain times 2.5, convert that to centimeters, 125 centimeters, you know, of rain a year. But it turns out that's not most of the world. Most of the world is much drier than that. And is in a brittle type of ecosystem. So we need management for livestock across it. Another issue here is the difference between domestic ruminants and wild ruminants. And we hear a lot of talk about rewilding. So the irony here is that the holistic management of domestic ruminants is actually how you rewild. That's actually how you bring that rewilding, and that's exactly what's going on in Africa. So if you were a giraffe or a zebra or an elephant, where would you rather be? Would you rather be in a lot of the national parks, which are practically like desert, or would you rather be in the the group ranches, which are using domestic ruminants to restore the landscape. So that's exactly what's happening. So the wild ruminants are coming back to the land that's restored with the domestic ruminants. So ultimately, the conversation of domestic and wild ruminants together, that's really what we should be talking about, in my opinion. Because that's where, disease transfer, that is a big issue. But we should be focusing on that issue. Because obviously risks involved. And who's going to bear the cost of that risk? So for example, if your cows get sick because they're in the presence of wild animals, you should be the only one to bear that cost, because you're taking the risk for the benefit of everyone. And so that's the kind of conversation, in my opinion, we need to be having. And one other thing I'll say before I wrap up, I believe this conference should be called Regenerative Livestock Transformation. And I'm going to argue that 2 years from now, if we have it again, it's called United Nations Global Conference on Regenerative Livestock Transformation. We really need to get the word regenerative into the conversation, because sustainable, in my opinion, is too passé. We need to be talking about regenerative. Any other question?
Real quick one. Is overgrazing too many animals?
I've got my plant in the audience here asking the question. The question is overgrazing too many animals? No. Overgrazing has nothing to do with the amount of animals. It has to do with how long the animals, even one animal, is in the paddock. There's something we call it the curse of the second bite. The curse of the second bite. In other words, one bite and move on. And what's happening in a lot of the world today is you simultaneously have overgrazing and under impact. You simultaneously have both. So you have too few animals staying too long in one spot. You actually need more animals on a shorter time frame. So overgrazing is about timing. It's not about animal numbers. Okay? All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.